what's really important to me after learning more and more about this work is legacy. And what legacy is what is left behind when someone dies. And often, let's say it's a positive legacy, it is what is the blessing that comes into this world upon this person's death.
Are you going through life blind? This is Eyes Wide Open with Nick Thompson. On this podcast, we share knowledge and stories that build human connection while elevating stigmatized societal issues such as mental health, holistic wellness, culture, free speech, and more. All to ensure we show up in the world with our eyes wide open. Our guest today is Katrina Brees, and Katrina is a New Orleans-based Mardi Gras artist. She's also a parade creator, independent costume designer who's been featured in several media publications. She's also the founder of Donna's Law, which is a group fighting for voluntary self-registration to prohibit gun sales to those who have mental health challenges. So it's completely voluntary, and you're doing wonderful work there to get laws passed on a state-by-state basis to have this voluntary self-registry. So thanks for coming on the show. I think your work, from what I've seen so far, is beautiful, and I just want to thank you for doing it right out of the gate. But how are you today? How are things going?
It's going well. It's a beautiful day in New Orleans. I just finished up my busy season of Mardi Gras, where I am doing a bunch of parades. So I am in recovery and enjoying Lent, which is a very important mental health holiday here in New Orleans.
Yeah, I bet, especially after Mardi Gras, right?
Yeah.
So my favorite question I ask everyone is, what did you want to be when you were growing up? How did that change? And how did you end up creating parades?
Sure. When I was growing up, really nobody asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. None of the women in my family had worked before. And the question I more often got was, what do I want my husband's occupation to be when I grow up? So the world of choosing a career was wide open to me. I really could have done anything. I came to New Orleans about 20 years ago and immediately fell in love with costume design and Mardi Gras parades, and started making a business into costume design, both in the streets and the parades, but also in the streets and parades that become films and television and commercials. And that has been a really fun career. I love what I do. I get to bring in a bunch of different skills to create a really joyous environment for thousands of people.
That's so cool. I've never met anyone. I've met costume designers before, but never met anyone that does Mardi Gras. I can't imagine. That's so exciting. Very creative.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, of all the industries that I've done costume design in, it's really the most out of the box and creative, and the sky's the limit, and so much more creative freedom.
Is that your favorite creative outlet, the Mardi Gras parades?
Yeah, mostly.
Yeah.
I do a lot though. I pretty much do parades during Mardi Gras and Halloween, and then the rest of the year I do other art forms, like I paint, and I also do casket design sometimes, and
I saw that.
workshops about DIY casket design, which I'm really into. That seems
How did you
to
fall into that? It's so obscure, but so cool.
Yeah, I had a relative that was dying, and she had cancer, and
Mm.
it was definitely going to happen. So it was okay for us to be discussing what the burial plan would be for her. And I went to the funeral home with her family, which was my cousins. And when we looked at the catalogs of caskets, it just felt like everything in there was wrong. That none of
Mm.
these felt like her. They all felt like big town cars from like the 70s. It didn't really have the right aesthetic, and it was so expensive and didn't have any technology really in it. It's not like they have like Bluetooth or something. They're just really expensive, heavy boxes.
Right.
So I decided that I was going to make one for her, and ended up making her one out of materials mostly that I found in her house. And she had been really into sailing and traveling And so I used a lot of the images and seashells and sand collection to create the decor of it. And then inside for the upholstery, I found a bolt of fabric that she had used for her patio furniture. And so I ended up just using the exact same fabric. And it was a wonderful experience to do that with for her, to create the art, to also have that as a healing, creative experience to interact with family and loved ones as they were coming to visit her and to say their goodbyes. I put a printer inside the casket in the workshop phase of it so that people could just print photos right from their phones, that we
Oh,
could
wow.
wallpaper into the casket. So I love being disruptive in the funeral industry and teaching other families how to do this. And it's so much fun, and it really changes the way that we interact with death and how our fears dictate our lives and things like that.
I literally got goosebumps listening to that story.
Aw.
Like, I well, because you think about death as tragic, and
Mhm.
people will give the rhetoric, "Oh, it's um, a celebration of life," but like everybody's is still not happy, right? Not
Yeah.
celebrating, and I think that's a really interesting way. I would have never thought of that, to make something that's so tragic actually be a celebration and be
Mhm.
a, instead of this, metal box that's going to go into the ground or into a moratorium or whatever. Um, yeah, I think it's such a different way to approach death, and it makes it a little bit softer and celebratory for people.
Yeah, and I think that part of the value of celebration is unification and the feeling of feeling alive. So in New Orleans, we have a really over the top funeral culture here with parades and bands, and it's very lively. And being forced to perform that when you're in that grief and tragedy is almost like being forced to lift your own self from the dead and then have to dance with all the people,
Right.
and it can be really difficult to lift out of that. And just to dance in public is very hard, but to dance with everybody at that moment, it is very difficult. But then the medicine that you get from the experience is so profound here. And I feel that one of the, well, I'm going to back up. When we think about the funeral industry, we're talking about undertakers. And what they're doing is they're undertaking these tasks that we have chosen to give up. So we can take them back. We can take whichever of those tasks we choose back, depending on your state and the legality of the
I
situation.
was going to
But
ask
you can
that
at least
actually.
participate. um, so when when we are doing rituals like that and participating and being hands-on and essentially like caring for every aspect of that person, in the end it gives us a lot more closure. It's like, for me, it almost feels like cleaning up after someone's life, like that they had this party that was life, and then this is just the last things that have to be cleaned up. And
The
uh
dreaded morning after a big party.
yeah. And so it's really like changed my life to get to be in that work and to teach other people to be excited and not scared and to use their creativity. um, I also really promote the idea of legacy. We can get really caught up in what kind of box is someone going to go in, and what kind of flowers and what music and what are we going to say and things like that. But what's really important to me, after learning more and more about this work, is legacy. And what legacy is what is left behind when someone dies. And often, let's say it's a positive legacy, it is what is the blessing that comes into this world upon this person's death. And that legacy could be, let's say, like the donation of money to a, a sports, like a high school sports league, or a scholarship, or a library donation, or an art donation. Um, the work that I'm doing now with Donna's Law, which is in legacy to my mom, Donna, has very much added a whole new dimension of her life and her purpose on this planet post mortem, which is so profound. And to be able to bring that to her life, that was not everything that she wanted it to be, and for her to be able to be used in this way to now save other lives is very exciting work to me.
It is, and it's needed work. And what I find so interesting, and I'm going to ask you to explain Donna's Law, but your story with your mom, would you like to share some of that with us and let us know what
Sure,
inspired you to start Donna's Law?
sure. My mom, Donna, was a really good mom, and she moved down to New Orleans right after I moved down. I came down, and then she came to visit for Thanksgiving and never left.
From where?
And in that time, we created art together and we worked together to create the parades. And she found a beautiful partner, Pat. And also, parallel to that, she was battling bipolar and she was also in the ups and downs of the difficulty of medicating that illness. And often would be between medications or medications would stop working, and but then there would be long periods of times where her medications did work well. And during a period at the end of her life, she was struggling really bad with the side effects of a medication that was black label and causes suicidality and impulsivity and psychosis. And she
Jesus.
was experiencing those side effects as well as some really intense physical side effects like extreme tremors and
Oh my
pain
gosh.
and insomnia. And in that period, our family just really jumped into action and we did everything with her at the lead of taking care of herself and making her own choices and her being empowered with the support of um, like good health care and her psychiatrist that she was very pleased with. And right before her death, was voluntarily committed 3 times because of the suicidality and impulsivity that was going on.
And was that
And
from the medic? You guys assume that was from the medication, or is that something she had struggled with?
I think that it's really hard to separate like what is bipolar and what is
Mm.
medication about bipolar, and I'm really unqualified
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah, no,
separate that. And my
no, I,
opinions change all the time. So
of
I've been
course,
um, watching what bipolar is for about 30 years of my life with my mom, and
it's
what
changed
that
so much
means has
too.
changed so much. Like when I was a kid it was called manic depression, and now there's a lot more awareness about how certain medications can trigger it in people. And so for example, like with my family, I think it's very important that we're aware of the sort of neurochemical
Yeah.
genetic reactions that we can have to certain drugs, which is what happened with my mom over and over again in different ways. On the day that she died, she was under the care of my stepdad, and he had quit his job to stay home with her and make sure that she was okay every day. And she had written to her doctor begging for help. We had been discussing another inpatient scenario for her, which she was really scared about. And we had also kind of run out of options there because her doctor wasn't approving it. And so that morning, my mom got on her phone and she searched the words "how to hang yourself," and Google showed her information that showed her that if she tried to hang herself, she would likely become a quadriplegic, and there were all these ways it could go wrong, and that the best option would be for her to purchase a handgun. And then she,
Wait, that's
yeah,
Google's search results. That's
well,
what the
like, yeah,
algorithm.
pretty much. I
What the
mean, like, when I
fuck?
looked, I got her phone after she died, and I could see the article that she read, and it had a whole like chart of all the methods, the success rate, the minutes of pain, um, For
Why
example,
does anything show up to say call the, suicide hotline or anything? Or is it
well,
just
I would
here's
love to discuss that with Google.
okay.
I've been trying, and I have been experimenting with things on Google to see if there are ways that they are responding to, let's say, like other wording. For example, I recently searched how to kill my wife just to see if Google would recommend a handgun or not. And it didn't
Jeez.
recommend any methods on how I should kill my wife. And it only showed me things like romantic comedies about killing your wife. So it clearly knows I I'm going
It
to
can do
assume
something.
that it's the legal department has been maybe subpoenaed about searches for people involving homicide, but I would imagine they haven't been subpoenaed as much for people who committed suicide because there isn't an ongoing investigation like that or an
Right.
investment in understanding what went wrong. So she then Googled gun stores, New Orleans, and it gave her directions to a gun store that was just minutes away from her. And she kind of snuck out and went there and purchased the first and only gun she's ever had. We don't have any waiting periods in Louisiana, much like the majority of America also doesn't have waiting periods. Here, we don't need permits or anything. I mean, as long as you have your ID and the right amount of money, you can purchase a gun here pretty much immediately. So she purchased that gun, and then she purchased a box of rose gold pink bullets that were for breast cancer awareness, which I feel like my mom got really like pink washed by this. And
Wow.
it's always really bothered me that in some way this like raised money for breast cancer. And it no longer does because I have been very vocal about this scenario and they
I
have
actually was
detached from
gonna
that campaign.
good.
Um, and my
What
mom
the
took,
hell? Like
I know,
anything
it's so
to
weird. Um,
pink
and
wash.
yeah, she took her purchases to the park and she shot herself at the park. Um, and died there. And it was later on that an employee of the park found her and contacted the police that contacted our family.
Oh my God, that's awful.
Yeah. So
That's
Donna's law is to keep that from happening to other people and their families. The the intervention that could have really helped my mom would be to have been able to opt out of her ability to purchase a gun. Had my mom been involuntarily committed all those times, she wouldn't have been able to purchase the gun because we as a society can all agree that someone who is in psychiatric crisis might be better off without unlimited access to firearms. So,
you would
with
think.
that, without interfering with the Second Amendment, Donna's Law enables people to voluntarily opt out. And when we think about the gun violence epidemic, what we're seeing is really this giant suicide epidemic. About two-thirds of gun deaths are suicide, and in some states, it's like 90% of
Yeah.
gun deaths are suicide. And then the most common means of suicide is handguns and guns in general. So if we know that the most likely way that someone's going to die by suicide is this easy access to purchase a firearm, we can enable them with a really simple tool to opt out, which is what Donna's Law does. And because it is voluntary and reversible, it essentially creates a voluntary waiting period for people who feel that they need it. And that can be someone like my mom who is experiencing really extreme episodic psychosis with suicidality, but it can be anybody that just thinks
Right.
that quick access to firearms might be dangerous for their future. And it's different than other types of, let's say, like red flag laws. So it's not put upon anybody, and there's no guns taken away. It's not for people that already have guns. It's more for people like my mom that, under normal circumstances, wouldn't be purchasing a gun like this.
I mean, I think
So,
it's important to emphasize the Second Amendment piece, just because, as you know, living in this country, we have extreme um, lack, I guess not even extreme. It's like a lack of gun laws and extremists on all sides of this thing. And I think what you do with Donna's law is that you pull the politics out of it, right? The pitting people against each other over what the gun law should be, and you kind of make it about the individual. And the other thing I wanted to ask you a little more about was what's the waiting period like? Because I can imagine somebody going through an experience like your mom that had extreme ups and downs could also make those decisions in the extremes up and downs, whether for better or for worse. So what are those waiting periods like?
So when someone signs up, it should be pretty immediate for them. It is really a matter of how quickly the state police file it with the FBI. And the way that it would work is this would be something that someone does when they are in sound mind. It
Right,
would be
right.
preventative. It wouldn't be in the middle of a crisis, them calling the police and getting this paperwork done. There are different ways for that to happen. But this is really for a calm time when one is thinking about making their suicide prevention plan, which is an activity that a lot of people in our country do when they have experienced suicidality and then they're going back into the world, either post psychiatric hospitalization or just in general to have a suicide prevention plan. And so this is something that can be added to that plan. Um, there are a lot of things that can be added to that plan. It could be therapies, it could be drugs. But one of the cool things about Donna's Law is that it has no side effects and it is totally free. So, of all your choices about the ways to kind of make that plan and have all those pieces coming together, I really believe Donna's Law should be people's first touch point into that plan. It is so simple. In states now, people can even sign up online. They can go online, print out a form, send that form in. So there's more and more access for people to use this tool. Right now, it's active in Washington State, Virginia, and Utah, and I have active bills sponsored in about a dozen other states. And what's really cool is that Donna's Law is appreciated in the states where it's needed the most. So for states like, let's say, Massachusetts, where it might take someone 5 months to get a gun and have to go through a lot of hurdles like an interview with the police and permits and things like that, they don't necessarily need that legislation as much as a state that has really zero barriers and has a
Right.
very high suicide rate. So Donna's Law is this like beautiful, creative legislation that I'm really proud of, and I wanted to tell you too about like how I got into this because I didn't um, have any real knowledge about doing this work before I did
Right.
it, and right after she died, I really couldn't understand like why the gun store had sold her the gun, and she
It
was
blows
having
my mind just thinking about that.
yeah, and she was having extreme tremors. Like she couldn't even eat with a fork anymore because she would stab her face. And so the idea that they would sell someone in that state a gun felt really, it was like
And
glaring.
there's no
To,
liability there either. Like a
right.
bartender can go to jail for over serving someone alcohol, but you can give someone a gun, no matter their state, depending on
Hmm.
the state, and there's no recourse. It's
Yeah,
just
and you might even be forced to give them a gun, even if you
yeah,
didn't feel like it was the right decision because of their Second Amendment. So you can't really discriminate against someone like Donna in that moment. I was really surprised that she was able to purchase it because she had been under so much inpatient psychiatric care. And I quickly learned that that was not the case in Louisiana and or anywhere else. So it seemed
do you
obvious.
know, I'm sorry, do you know,
Sure.
is there a correlation between states that have lax gun laws and having higher death by suicide from gun wounds?
Yes.
Is that correlated? Okay.
Yes. And also, when a state, let's say like Massachusetts, they have very strict gun laws. So that doesn't all of a sudden make the other types of suicide methods rise. So it doesn't then like become another way they do it. They just don't do it. Um,
Yeah.
one
You
of
know,
the,
I
go ahead.
I was just going to say there's a comedian that I listened to. This was a while ago, and it stuck with me. Which when I learned a little bit about you, it kind of re-entered my head. He said he doesn't have a gun because he's worried that he will impulsively like kill himself when he's down. And
Hmm.
I remember hearing that. This was maybe a year ago now, and I just remember hearing that, and I was thinking, I was like, that's so true because it's such an if you're going to do many of the other ways you can attempt,
Hmm.
there's like more of a process to it, where with a gun you're like it's just over.
Yeah, and there's also not much intervention time. So,
Right.
like with other methods, someone can get their stomach pumped, they can change their own mind, and all of a sudden have like clarity about it and call 911, or they could be walked in on by a loved one.
Right.
Very few people die of other methods. It's not that easy to do. And so, when we think about suicide prevention, we really have to think about lethal means. Like sometimes I think I don't even know that the psychiatry industry should be in charge of suicide anymore because it is so
Okay.
connected to the gun industry. And if, like, for example, let's say with climate change, we wouldn't say, oh, we should put the psychiatrists in charge of that because there's obviously some mental problems going on where people
Right.
can't grasp reality.
Right.
Um,
Jeez, that's a good point. But
so I think
do
we
the gun lobbies, like, have you come in contact with them at all in any way? Are they? I would imagine they're against this because they want the sales. But I'm just curious if you've run into any pushback from
Oh
that
yeah, for
industry.
sure.
Okay, they're so
Um,
powerful.
yeah, and I would say that the pushback is really from the gun lobby. It's not even from their members.
Yeah.
People who have guns typically know people who have shot themselves and died. And
Jeez.
as a gun owner, the most likely scenario that's going to go down with someone dying with your gun is suicide. And when it comes to women with guns, it's even more because they tend to have less training and not necessarily always making the choices about that they purchase it for the same reasons.
Right.
There's also a lot of gifting of guns, like the way people nowadays would never give someone a puppy for Christmas, like
I
that.
was just gonna make that analogy. Like that's why you
Yeah,
don't give anyone a dog or a cat or an animal for Christmas
yeah,
unless
and
they
don't
want
give
it.
them a gun. Don't give your girlfriend
Jeez.
a gun for Valentine's Day.
Jeez. Well, you can use the pink bullets, right?
Yeah,
It's
right.
this
Super
is like
romantic.
I had no idea that I just it's I'm speechless. I'm just continue. you're
Yeah,
you're
so
you're
I
you're
want to talk about the elephant in the room with the NRA, and I have
yeah.
this fantasy that one day in the future, the NRA and I are going to like sign people up together, and we're going to profess how this only allows for more gun freedom and more safety, which is at the root of their mission.
They
But
don't I
we
hate to
haven't
be
gotten there
give you a
yet.
spoiler alert, but they don't care about their mission.
Yeah, it's
But
been.
I love that. That's actually I think so. I have the same thing with reality TV, right? I look
Mhm.
at this, and I'll say this in interviews too. It's like I'm not trying to put them out of business. I'm not trying to stop reality TV. I would love to work with Netflix. I would love to work with these production companies and come up with what the standards are to produce these things. And I think
Mhm.
if I looked at them and I was angry at them or mad at them or hated them, this wouldn't what I do wouldn't go anywhere. And I think it's the same for you. Even if you guys aren't simpatico, having that sort of be your North Star is going to give you like more of a positive purpose as opposed to trying to like take someone down or take down the NRA or whatever that is.
Yeah, I think they'd probably win too on
A
who's
hundred
taking
percent.
who down.
100%. Sometimes I'm like, should I like be keeping an eye out for these like Netflix executives trying to poison me or something? I'm kidding about that, but
Well,
I do.
I think about
You
that
wonder.
too,
Yeah.
and I think about death a lot, and I think about like how one wants to die. And lately, I've been thinking I want to be assassinated. Like that is would be the like ultimate advocacy death, and if that's what happens, I'm okay with it.
That means that they're scared of you, and that's your legacy.
Yeah.
That's yeah, that would be your legacy. I
So,
mean, I don't want to make light of that situation, but like I kind of feel I feel you a little bit on that. I don't
hmm
I won't maybe say I want to get assassinated, but like when certain things happen, I'm kind of like, okay, this is why, right? Because it's
hmm
actually making a difference. It's actually moving something along. So
yeah. And I've learned to have a lot of compassion for people who are, let's say, like cold dead hands, Second Amendment folks. I have felt that one of the things that I've learned to be grateful for in having these conversations with them is that I don't live in that level of fear. I don't feel like there's always someone out to get me, that I have
yeah,
to sleep with a handgun under my pillow, that I'm never letting that happen to me again type of trauma. And I have a lot of sympathy for the people that are holding on to these guns because they have experienced some really intense trauma, and this
yeah,
seems to be comforting to them. So to be comforted by a gun, to me, is a lifestyle that I'm grateful I am not in.
yeah. Me too. Yeah, me too. I think you know, we don't have to get into so much about guns, but I think the thing with guns is I personally don't want one. I don't ever want to have to use one. I don't want to have one in my house for similar reasons to, you know, what I mentioned earlier. It's like when you're, you know, I've suffered with depression my whole life. I have those moments where I think like maybe it would be better if I wasn't here. You know, I think, and I think a lot of people have those, but having that like having something that is so deadly and so instant, I just
hmm
don't think it would be good. But people who have been traumatized by it, like I just feel it's unfortunate that they are holding onto that gun, that they're kind of trauma bonded with that
hmm
gun. And you know, as a way to, you know, you hear stories every so often about someone breaking into someone's house, they get the gun, they shoot their family member, they shoot themselves on accident, and it just ends up creating so much chaos that isn't even really um, doing what it was supposed to do for you in that scenario. So it's
Right.
kind of like, I guess I know we're not going to change anybody's or everybody's mind there, but it just doesn't quite add up to me.
hmm Yeah. Where do you live?
I'm in Chicago.
Uh huh. Yeah. I
Guns
mean,
everywhere
I
here.
think that like urban thoughts about guns can be very different than rural thoughts, and the way that guns impact our lives in, let's say, an urban environment is a
hmm
lot more traumatic than, let's say, a father son bonding hunting trip, you know?
Right.
So it's also important to start discussing the different types of guns out there. And the most deadly gun is really the handgun. And
Oh,
when we think about how are people dying in America, it's the handgun. Even though there's a lot of attention on semi-automatics and things like that, that the majority is actually by handgun, and it's because it's really so easy to use. And like my mother's gun is so small, it has no safety on it. It took me 20 seconds to figure out how to make it work. It's so obvious. I showed it to a friend of mine that is a firearms collector, and he said, I can't imagine a gun better designed for putting in your mouth and shooting yourself.
my
So
God.
when we're thinking about the manufacturing and the design, there's and Google and all these different things, like, and you know, legislation. There's so much that we can be doing to shift this problem and bring solutions. And one of my hopes, one of the things that keeps me like inspired about suicide prevention is that it has been so sloppy, the efforts to stop this, that there is a lot of potential for us to actually address it, because we haven't addressed it and failed. We just haven't really addressed it.
That's a good point. And why do you think we haven't addressed it? Because a lot of other countries have addressed it. And guess what? They don't have these problems. They don't have mass shootings. They don't have guns in general, which also consequently lowers suicide rates,
hmm
lower gun violence, obviously. Like, what do you think is the holdup? Is it the NRA? Is it
Yeah.
Second Amendment advocates, the media, probably all of it,
No, it's
actually.
just the NRA.
Yeah, they're so powerful. And the thing
Yeah.
with something like Donna's Law being voluntary, you would
Mhm.
think them and Second Amendment enthusiasts would look at this as more freedom.
Mhm.
Like freedom for the
Right.
individual to choose what the individual does and the individual can and cannot buy, just like they can go to the store and choose what they want to eat and what they don't want to eat, just like they
Mhm.
can go to the store and buy the clothes they want to buy and the clothes they don't. And this is just like a no-brainer to me. And
Mhm.
honestly, like I think so. I now at this point I know several people that have been in mass shootings,
Mhm.
and whenever I think about this, that's like all I think about is those,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But these are not even just common sense. These are like this is like necessary.
Mhm.
It's necessary treatment. It's part of treatment, like you said. And I think your messaging of putting this as like step one
Mhm.
is really really a good approach and a good way to think about it because it is free and
Yeah,
it's
thank you.
totally voluntary.
When you're talking about those mass shootings too, it's so often that we hear the word self-inflicted gunshot wound as the end of those shootings.
Yep.
And when we think about, let's say, two-thirds of gun deaths being suicide, that doesn't mean that the other one third is separate from suicide. There is a ton of murder suicide in domestic violence going on. The most common type of mass shooting that we actually don't hear about is what's called a family annihilation,
Mm-hmm.
where the father or another parent takes out his whole family and then himself. And I one of my, I guess, like journeys in this work is compassion and learning to have such deep compassion for the people in these scenarios. Like when I think about that dad that is standing in his living room with a wiped out family covered in blood because his access to firearms was more than he could handle. And then we're going to criminalize that person, and that person's going to kill themselves. And I mean, this is really in some ways, a consumer product recall opportunity.
No, it's a really good point. And and that's the thing. And I think it's when I think about stories like your mom's and I think about the scenario where you just said, it's almost like we want to villainize someone. It's the whole like committed suicide versus died by suicide, all of that stuff, right? Like we're getting better at the way we talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
maybe in some cases, but like there isn't that empathy for the person who's doing it and what struggles they're having too, right? Whether it's self-inflicted or what did you call it? The family
Annihilation. Mm-hmm.
annihilation, and then self-inflicted. There's that access to these weapons for people who are not well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even after any kind of shooting in the news, that's what you hear. We have a mental health problem. We have a mental. Well, then why aren't we doing something about it? Like we just say it, and then everybody goes into the back, and then it's left to people like you who are doing the actual hard work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a pretty weird scenario what's going on with gun violence in America, and part of this journey for me has been to understand my country and to see how I feel about my country and is my country broken? And what I found is that my country is not broken, that there is
Mm.
still a door that I can walk through with a legislation, that I can find sponsors that will listen to me, that I can still bring rational, no brainer, self control gun legislation forward at I wish I could do it a lot faster, but I do feel
It's the
that it is
government.
moving
It's never.
faster.
You could work
Yeah,
24 hours a day for the rest of your life, and that government is not picking up the pace at all.
yeah. One thing I've learned though, like after the insurrection, that in some ways we're lucky that our government doesn't move that fast, because if our government could just pass laws in 6 months, we could all be goners.
Well, here they can when they want to. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the crazy thing. When it's something that the government benefits from or wants to do, or their donors benefit from, or the NRA wants done, or money needs to go to a foreign war, like the military, they can pass that shit snap of a finger. But when it comes
Hmm.
to actually like doing hard work and getting stuff done for individual citizens, even though you're representing a in a lot of cases a community that can't represent itself, right? They're
Hmm.
not able, they're not here, whatever that
Hmm.
is. And so you're fighting this battle against state governments and
Hmm.
federal probably in a bit too, but you're representing people that would have your back but like aren't necessarily able to have your back for one reason or another, so that has to
Yeah.
be really isolating.
Well, I actually feel a lot of love and support from the government and from the officials that I've been able to talk with.
Good.
And I feel that um, I mean, I sit in their offices and they cry with me, and it is amazing to like have that interaction and be like hugging them at Congress and things like
uh,
that. But this lobby effort is outsized beyond what the citizenry really wants to be happening. And
yeah,
so, and people are very scared of this opponent in legislation. I cannot think of any
and
organization
that's
of
the
lobbyists,
NRA.
yeah, that
Yeah,
people are more frightened to stand up against. And one
it's
of the
because they all have
issues,
guns. It's
yeah, I've been
like
thinking,
literally it's there's a mental piece, but there's the fact that they all have guns.
well,
You
that's
know,
what
it's
they've made us think. If you really like look up these people, they're like dorky marketing kids.
hey. I'm a dorky marketing kid. I guess I'm not a kid, but yeah, I get it. I get it.
Yeah, they're not they don't look like paramilitary. They're the being part of legislation is very civil, and they have a ton of power, and so when they're there they can just be civil and, rest in
Yeah.
their power.
Oh yeah. I've had some interactions. I'm pretty politically active to begin with, and I've had some actions with politicians.
Hmm.
What actions? I don't know. Conversations with politicians, and I'm on my end too trying to move some legislation and get some stuff in place. And I think the decorum is there. It's like that getting that time on their calendar, which it sounds like you've been able to do a few times at least. It's so difficult. I've got one legislator I've been trying to get with for 4 months, and we haven't been able
Hmm.
to like get that 30 minutes together.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that on its own is very hard, but it actually makes me happy to hear that they're kind to you and that they spend time with you, because if someone asked me, I would have guessed no without talking to
Hmm.
you. Like they probably don't give you the time of day. So that's a little heartening to hear that.
Yeah, I have found. So I live in Louisiana where Donna's Law does not exist, and 5 years later still does not exist because I am not going to let it crush my spirit. And I feel that I can save lives in other states with more rational committees that want to support life
Yeah.
saving tools for their people. And so for me, going national has helped me not get like down on how difficult it is, let's say in Louisiana, to make this happen.
Right.
That I'll just keep moving where I'm finding success.
Good for
And
you.
that strategy has kept me going. And I hope that my work can be, let's say, a wave. Like when we think about like feminism, there's like different waves of feminism, and I can see it happening in the gun control world. And I would say that maybe I'm like early second wave gun control activist, and I can see that the messaging of the next wave is a lot harsher on the NRA, and
Yeah.
really saying like you have to exhibit rationality, in order to represent the government. And so it is changing. I feel like the more people that get involved with legislation, the better that we're going to do.
Yeah.
I look forward to being able to hand this off at some point to a larger organization because I don't have the capacity to do it
No.
all the time like this. And I do have an amazing team that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Professor Fred Vars at the University of Alabama is the first person to conceive this legislation, and he is the person that drafts the bills and works with me on in the legalese of it all. and he has been an amazing partner for me through this work. And we've also him and I have then found other help from, for example, a researcher named Brian Barks that has been hugely supportive of the work and helped us to collect data and messaging and things like that. Both of these people also struggle with bipolar and suicidality and have been hospitalized.
Mm.
So one of the amazing, I guess, revelations of this work in Donna's Law, just beyond just the gun stuff, is seeing people with mental illness that are so successful, and
Yeah.
like Fred and Brian, and seeing how they've advanced in their careers, and that with proper treatment and supportive families and some luck that they are able to continue in their lives. So that's been very inspiring to me as well.
That is really inspiring to hear. And it's one of the reasons I started this podcast is to destigmatize things that people have an opinion on. And when we look at things like mental illness, I find and I wasn't diagnosed until my 20s with depression because I hid it and I didn't tell anyone about it and I didn't talk about it. I didn't even know what it was for a long time. And after being diagnosed with it and secretly seeing a therapist and not telling anybody about it and being ashamed of it, like, and this wasn't that long ago. This was like 8 years ago that I started this journey. So, I think one of the reasons that I did that is because I didn't want people to think less of me or think something
Mhm.
was wrong with me because I was thinking like something was wrong with me. Right. And
Yeah.
so as I became more successful in my career, as I started to put it together, right, mentally and really get myself into a good place, it became clear to me that like this could have happened a long time ago if I would have started talking about it a long time ago, or if I would have seen a therapist a long time ago, or I would have, I had some weird medication trials and errors too that kind of scared me away from that because I had a really bad experience. So I think one of the to round my long story, one of the things that I think is important is that we do showcase that mental illness, mental suffering, mental health challenges doesn't make anyone any less of a human being. And just because you have a mental illness doesn't prohibit you from participating in society. Like you can still participate in society. And I
Yeah,
think that
for
that's
sure.
what's great about hearing those stories.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
um what is your next step or what's next on the docket for you? Do you have another state that you're working with legislation on, or what can
Yeah.
you share for us there on your future with this?
Yeah. Today I was working with Georgia, and I've been working with New Hampshire to on Thursday has a vote in the House, and it
They
has been
do.
recommended to be voted positively. So that's good. It's pretty constant now that there is something popping. It's cool to see all these legislative people in my inbox, just
They're coming to you now?
yeah, these like
Oh my
casual
God, that's so
relationships.
awesome.
And one of the things that I love to do is have sleepovers. And so pretty much everyone on my team I've had a sleepover with. and so it's cool, like how bonded we are, like Fred and Brian and I, and then to be able to be given the respect from these legislators to hear us and to allow us to essentially critique and edit the work that they're doing,
Yeah.
and for them to, I guess, what, like, one of the things I'm doing a lot of is telling them what resources we can bring to them. So when a legislator has a bill that they think they can probably pass, there's a lot of work that goes into that. There
Hmm.
is a lot of writing, there's a lot of partnerships and endorsements and finding people who are going to give testimony and things like that. So, what our team can do is support the legislator in that and say, okay, here's the contact info for the state chapter of all these, let's say, like mental health organizations that can then come testify and support this.
Right.
And building that is just about building relationships. It's just about
Yeah.
like building the relationships with Fred and Brian, and all of us being excited to work together for this long, and then building the relationships with families across America that have had this loss. And there are so many families out there that have had this loss, but how do you then take one of those people and bring them into that legislative world and show them how much impact that their loved one's story can have? Because legislators writing bills, it's just paper and words. But when you
Yeah.
can show a person that had a beautiful life and then this happened to, it's so impactful and so helpful to legislators, and not just in the work I'm doing, but um, just storytelling in general. I have been testifying for other bills and doing other advocacy work since learning how to do this with Donna's Law. And testimony is something that we can do for free and we can provide in the legislative committees, whether it's about whatever the issue is. So, like, for example, with the safety and representation for reality actors to have support. So people having testimony that they've written that they can submit, whether that's within the committee or to a legislator that you want to talk to, can be really helpful. And I wanted to say too, like, you mentioned about like how hard you've been trying to get this one appointment with this one person. um, it it could still happen.
Oh, it will.
Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's about the climate, not the message. And so much of what I've been talking about this for 5 years, Fred has been talking about it for 10 years. And we're just now getting into a moment where America is ready for what we're talking about. And part of that was because of the destruction of so many other checks and balances and gun controls that have disappeared. And now Donna's Law makes more sense when there is no waiting period for people.
Right.
So much has changed just in America. And then also each election is an opportunity for us to make more relationships. And then looking at those committees and sort of targeting people specifically that will be voting on it and things like that. And I also recommend like diversifying, because it can be really tough to be involved so deeply with a cause that is so connected with one's own trauma. And so I have,
We could probably have
um,
a whole episode and talk
yeah,
more about that. Yeah.
yeah. So one of the things that I'm really passionate about is nipple equality. And in many states, women can receive 5 or 10 years in jail for having their nipples out. So that has become a legislation that I'm really excited to work on.
Are you
And
gonna run for office at some point?
no,
Because I feel like you've
never.
got a platform you're building here.
No, it's like, so, I mean, I apologize for not having that calling, because I do respect the people that have given up their lives and tons of money in order to acquire these very low paying, high stress jobs. For me, um, so I apologize that I'm not going to do that because
You don't
it's
have to
noble.
apologize, but yeah, I
And I
feel
do
you.
feel like I could do it, and I'm at that level. But for me, I just want to do the things I want to do. Like, I don't want people coming into my office every day with their own platforms and,
Right.
school committee or like something like that. Like, that just wouldn't bring me the passion. So I like to think of myself as citizen number one, and I hope
Mm.
everyone else thinks of themselves as citizen number one, and be an advocate for yourself and for what you're passionate about, and know that these stories just have so much value in making change.
That's a really, really good point. And I think thinking of yourself as that citizen one, I've never really thought of it that way. I always kind of feel like when I'm doing my activism in whatever way it is, I'm just like throwing the world on my back in a backpack. And I'm like, I'm going to take this on if nobody else is going to do it. So,
Hmm.
thinking of that, that's kind of freeing almost to think about yourself as citizen one, as opposed to someone who's got to carry the burden, right? Because
Hmm.
like you said, this is your this is your trauma. This is your life. This was your mother. And
Hmm.
I mean, just the way you talked about legacy at the beginning, and now your mom's legacy is saving lives through Donna's Law. I think it's, it's a good initiative that you've probably been able to execute because you think of yourself as citizen one, and you don't bear the burden of taking on the NRA by yourself.
Right. Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
like to think about that in my nipple equality work, which I call equalitity, that in that
Nice.
work, I get to be the NRA. Like, I get to be like, these are my rights, and like,
Yeah.
off my cold, dead tits, you know?
I love it. I love it. That's
So
a good,
it's nice to have a different opponent.
yeah, no kidding. Probably who is the opponent? Is that like a state by state thing or is that municipal or
I think there just really hasn't been a real effort to make
yeah.
female topless equality, and it hasn't been positioned as important at all. And women often take on the burden of, let's say, like advocacy for children's issues and
Right.
all kinds of other issues. And so they have, I think,
Because women are
let it
caretakers.
go. Yeah.
Like it's so
And I,
it's I'll be fine. I'm gonna go help the hungry kids. It's admirable, but also it's like self care, self care.
Yeah. Yeah, I see it as like I hope to be the Rosa Parks of tits. I see it as like if it matters where Rosa Parks sits, it matters whether I have to wear a shirt or not. That it's
Mhm.
truly civil rights. And when we have any kind of oppression that impacts people like that in our country, then what we're doing is we're decreasing their ability to give back into society. And so, as a
Mhm.
whole, by oppressing them, we oppress ourselves, we oppress everything. We don't make the money we should make. We fail in all kinds of ways because we're lacking that involvement from oppressed people. So
Mhm.
even as something as small as any kind of equality, no matter what it is, even if it's nipples, which I will say that it's not so much that I feel a strong need to take my tits out. It's more that the idea of going to jail for 10 years because of something that I see dogs and children and men and statues do every day is detrimental to my trajectory of success in life. And I can see that for all women. And
It's more
so,
freedom. It's literally more
yeah,
freedom.
yeah. And I think women can handle more freedom.
Yeah, I think so too. I think so too. Um, last thing I want to ask you, and then I turn it over and you can ask me anything. But oddly enough, you have some reality TV experience too.
Yes.
And I literally read that, was it yesterday when you emailed me and I was like, when worlds collide, right? Like what a
Yeah.
strange bedfellow situation. But tell me tell me about your reality TV experience.
Sure. So I was dating a makeup artist, and Louisiana was having this huge Hollywood South boom of all these TV shows. We were having more filming than anywhere in the country was
I
happening
remember that.
here, and pretty much anyone interested could be on a show. And it was also like around this time of all these disasters that had happened in Louisiana, like Katrina and the BP oil spill. So the film industry was economic opportunity for
Yeah.
everybody, and it was seen as very positive when it arrived here. And then so I began being recruited by America's Got Television about 4 years before I actually showed up to do an audition. And they would write to me every year that they were going to do auditions in New Orleans, and they really wanted a parade maker. And in my head I'm thinking, like, do these people even know what a parade is? Because
They
parade is
Googled it.
like in the street and you guys are on a stage with like
Yeah.
90 seconds. Like, this does not make any sense to me. And for years the producer just kept writing to me and talking about how much he'd want my work on there. And I told him that there was no way that I would audition a parade because parades are lots of people.
Yeah.
And
And
to have to
big, bigger
audition
than a
something that
stage.
big would be really cost prohibitive. So they gave me the opportunity to create a video of the parade work that I had done. So I created kind of a bunch of different B-roll from the parades, and then to my surprise, it was approved, and they put me into what what appears on television to be audition 1, but it's really like audition 4 at that point.
Right. So,
And I really
so it's
enjoyed
not
it.
100% accurate is the what you see
I
on
really had a
TV.
good time. Like, it was so
Yeah.
cool. I got all these top paraders in New Orleans to come do it with me. We made the most extravagant spectacle that has ever filled up 90 seconds.
Oh my gosh.
Um, I got to be in front of, so it was held at a big arena here in New Orleans, and so I think there was probably like 5,000 people in the audience, and
Whoa.
a lot of those people are people that I end up interacting with in my life for the rest of time. um, so all that was super cool, and we were well received by the judges. We moved through, and the audience loved us, and it was really amazing to do it. And then after that came the contracts, which are not so fun.
No, they're not. They're long. They don't make a lot of logical sense, and
Yeah,
they're hard to understand.
yeah. And so luckily I have big lawyer's daughter energy and was willing to take that contract to an attorney, which was very difficult. And even getting an attorney to look at one of those contracts is cost prohibitive. And I was very lucky that at the time my dad was a lawyer. One of his lawyer friends had a husband that was in the entertainment industry and was willing to look at the contract.
You were connected. That's such a big difference,
Yeah, but
having that
not even
connection.
connected enough, because what I learned from that experience is like, okay, so my lawyer then tells me that this is a horrible contract that I shouldn't sign. And then, but we don't know how to negotiate it because we don't know where their middle ground is going to be. Because even though I found an entertainment lawyer, they've never actually worked on this specific
Right.
contract before. And then I tried finding like an agent that wanted to take me on, and I couldn't find anyone because there wasn't really any money there for them.
Mhm.
So that was difficult, and even my mom was like, just sign it, let's go have fun, let's go to Vegas. But I just couldn't
I'm
sign
so
it. And
glad you were smart enough to even think about that. Like, because even like I didn't have a lawyer review mine, but I read it and I had to have some amendments made to it. But there was a lot of it where I was just kind of like, who cares, right? Like, who cares?
mhm,
Who cares if they have my likeness for 5 years? What am I going to do? Who cares if I
mhm,
can't run for office for 5 years? Am I going to do
mhm,
that? Maybe, I don't know. Like,
mhm.
but you don't realize like how prohibiting some of these things are, and they just own you. They just
Oh
own
yeah,
you.
this
They
one
own your
like would have
likeness.
owned me forever.
Yeah,
And in like other galaxies, and I mean intergalactically they own you, and they become your manager. They have to approve all your
exactly.
appearances. And then you look at other people that have been on the show and you say like, okay, let me look at their tour schedule. Am I impressed by that? No.
No.
Like, I think I could get to there.
Yeah, no kidding.
All the art would have been theirs. So,
I
for
was going to
example,
ask you that. Like all of your costumes and all the work that
yeah,
you
and
did would
all my
be
my Mardi Gras
Jesus.
floats and
Were they
everything.
paying for it?
No, they don't pay for anything. And then, so yeah, it was probably the most like the toughest, longest decision I ever had to make in my life was to
I
decide
bet.
not to sign that. And I also had all this huge team of people that had also been approved to go to Vegas. And I had to stand up to them and say, like, hey, all my friends that are super
Oh
excited
my
about this,
gosh.
like, we're not going anywhere, because
Did you
I'm
get
too scared
pushback
to
for
sign
that?
this. Yeah, yeah, I did. But it was
Yeah.
scary, to have to let everyone down because it was super exciting and they really like hype it up. And when I don't know, it's easy to be like glamored by it all.
Oh, believe me,
Yeah.
I know. And I would say on a show like America's Got Talent, and so like the weird thing for me is I didn't get, famous or however you want to put it for anything about me. It was for a relationship. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think like there's as much as I still struggle every day with everything that's happened, there's like a cognitive dissonance I'm able to do with it
Mm-hmm.
where I'm like, this was a piece of my life. This is a part of me. This isn't me. This is something that I
Mm-hmm.
did. Where I feel like if you went on America's Got Talent, you're showcasing all of your art, all of your work, what you've dedicated so much of your life to doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's like you. So the investment there is like, it's a total different kind of investment for you
Yeah.
to make that decision and to take along all of these people that are your friends and your coworkers and all of that. And you
Mm-hmm.
took the, and I commend you for this. You took the responsibility of being the leader, taking all, all sides of the
Mm-hmm.
frustration there, and
Mm-hmm.
managing both sides to do what was best for you and all the people that work for you. And I want to commend you for that, because I don't know if I would have been able to do that. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people would walk away from that.
Yeah, it was really hard. Um, like I said, I mean, one of the hardest decisions in my life was giving that up. And but I'm grateful that I did, because I am pretty much like feral and wild, and I would have ended up owing them millions of dollars.
Going rogue, right? Going
Yeah.
rogue.
And it was amazing to see like what happens when you stop signing. So essentially, you get edited out, you never appear, you evaporate. And a lot of the camera team that had filmed us was New Orleans based for the
Yeah.
episode. And so I would run into them at other film gigs, and they'd be like, "What happened? You did such a good job. I thought you were going to Vegas. You weren't there." And the cameramen ended up being so emotionally impacted that that my beautiful work was never seen by the public, that they volunteered to come to my studio with those same people and shoot a promo video with us just for
Oh my
free,
gosh,
like for
that's
us. And
cool.
so I mean, I'm so grateful for them doing that. um I think in the
You-
end, it all worked out nicely. It's this strange memory for all of us that were there, because there's no documentation of it. And like
so
even
weird.
today, like my dad like still doesn't understand why they won't just let us see it. He's like, "Oh, but we could just see it, right?" And I'm like, "No, dad." Like,
They guard footage like it's crazy. I
mhm.
think this is you want to dive into conspiracy of reality TV a little bit here with me? I think there's so much footage of everything, and they want to keep such a tight view of what they show. And I think it's because there's so much contradiction in the footage. There's so much foul play in the footage. There's so much, and they're worried that once that floodgates open, all of these, so they, instead of sending you and worrying it's going to end up on YouTube or end up out there, the footage of all the work that you did, they'd rather just lock it away because they don't want to open Pandora's box of all the footage that they have. That's kind of what I
Yeah.
think. But it is unfortunate because you don't get to see the output of your work. But at least
Mhm.
that's so cool. They came into that video though. What a good
Yeah.
group of
And
people.
I wanted to tell you about, I was listening to you on some other podcasts this week, being interviewed. So for my building of parasocial relationship with people for today. And you were telling a story about the water, and about the way that water was being controlled at the hotel and things like that. And all of a sudden, I had this memory. That's when I wrote to you, because I was hired on a show called The Colony, which
Yes.
only had two seasons. And the second season took place in New Orleans. And it was kind of like a Survivor, but urban type of scenario.
Okay.
And
I don't think I've
the
ever heard of that one.
it's not very good. I want to say it was probably like 2010 that it came out, and it was on Discovery. And so they, put all these educated people into all this sleep deprivation, and then they housed them inside this pretty much Hurricane Katrina out apartment complex, which then they put the giant containers all the way around, like a huge wall. So it was like it was like an island, but like an urban island. And
Sounds like
then,
the Walking Dead is what it
yeah, it
sounds
was
like.
pretty
Like building
sketchy.
building a compound and throwing a bunch of people in there and seeing what happens. Maybe it's more like the Squid Games or something. But anyway,
Yeah, so
continue.
they were very strategic about what resources would be there. Like I think there was like a pig and like a half functional motorcycle, and things were being planted there so that they could essentially barely survive but keep ticking. And I saw this ad on Craigslist, and it was like, "We need people for the colony on this date for $40." And so, and my boyfriend was going to be a makeup artist on it, and I was like, I really want to do it. So I applied and I got it, and I told my boyfriend that I'd be there at work that day with him, and he was like, "Don't do it. Don't come here. This is awful. It's not what you think." You know, and then I was like, "How awful is it?" And he was just like, "You know, you're gonna do what you're gonna do because that's how you are."
I was gonna say,
But he
I
was
bet.
right.
So I was like, you went.
Yeah. And when I got there, we were in this like holding room, and we could see televisions with the colonists that were doing different things. And the premise of the show was that there was this pandemic, and so people
Oh,
had
that's
to wear
eerie.
hazmat suits and things like that. And they had all these weird people in the room, and there were these guys that were like giant goon like hillbillies in overall type of thing, and then they'd have some like
How
hot
is this
women that were
marketed?
really jacked.
Was this marketed as like a competition show, or I'm gonna have to
No,
go look this up.
nobody gets voted off. They're all stuck there.
How does it end? How do you win?
I don't know.
Like,
I haven't watched. I think it's about learning and about educating on like how you would survive, maybe.
this is so interesting. I might actually have to go watch an episode of this one back in the
So
day.
then the producers give us all gas masks, and they had us dress very like Mad Max, but less sexy. And then we have
Yeah.
our gas masks on, and they have us lined up. And then all of a sudden, the costume designer comes out, and she says that our gas masks look stupid, and that they should get rid of them. And my boyfriend was like, "Don't give up your gas mask. Like, hold it." And I was like, "Okay, okay." So I kept
Wha-
mine. Um, and
This is
then they tell
wild.
us that they want us to target things that have water content and destroy them in the colony. So they tell us that the colonists have created this um, like water system for rainwater, and then they tell us that they have certain canned foods like canned
Hmm.
fruit that has very high water content, and we should go for those. I mean, this is some really like sick stuff that
Yeah.
they're telling us. And then they put the two giant goon guys in charge of our marauder gang, and we're all just waiting for the colonists to sit down for dinner so that we can attack them while they're in their peace.
This is
And they've been
crazy.
working like all day, and we've been watching them on the cameras like work so hard to prepare this meal, and we're just like, I
We're
mean,
gonna
and
ruin it.
there's no screening for the people that they have hired. Like, let's us like the people that they've hired are also like excited to go beat up strangers. So it's a very heated bunch
This
of
is
people.
insane.
It
Like
is.
they're
Eh,
like psychologically profiling people to go fight people. Like
yeah.
what?
And then so we're waiting for them to like sit down at their dinner, and our goons start like fighting each other because they're so aggressive. And we have to like break that up before we even go in. And then the producers give them this canister, which I'm going to call tear gas because I don't know what else to call it, but essentially it emitted this gas that then like made your eyes tear up. So I'm assuming tear gas. And so
This is
they give
insane.
the like more these like guys that they're like, you guys are in charge of these canisters. And so then they let us in, and we all go like walking down the street in this apocalyptic apartment complex. And then all of a sudden we see them, and they start putting these hazmat suits on and, you know, playing into it. And then we go into their dining area, and we just start like smashing everything.
Hmm.
And we like tip over their water. And then one of the goons like throws the canister at them, and then they kick it back at us. And then we all get like gassed. But luckily
What
I
a
got my gas
shit
mask
show.
on.
I was gonna say it's a good thing that you listened to your boyfriend and you kept that
Yeah.
gas mask.
And
Wow.
then it got like really violent,
But
and
how is this legal?
you know, I don't know, and that we only got $40 too.
I'm gonna stop complaining about what I got paid because $40 to go get your ass kicked and tear gassed and invade a
Yeah.
colony. Probably worth a little bit more.
And then it got like into this brawl. And I am like such a coward, especially when it comes to like my physical safety and like my teeth. um, and so I start freaking out. I like end up grabbing this like board to defend myself with and make sure like no one's coming at me. And as I'm like looking around me, I'm seeing like one of the images that is so violent that like comes back to me is that there was this older man and he was getting his head like punched into the ground and his head was bouncing back at the guy's fist, and it was like when a kid has one of those like balloons with the elastic band and they just keep and it keeps coming back at them.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so it's like we're in the apocalypse, it's this pandemic, now we're in this brawl, and then we all get like called back to holding afterwards.
I
And
can't. I can't
so
believe this.
yeah, and then some of the people that were there, like they're so fired up, you know, like they want to go back and fight these people and like kill them. And so this
Hmm.
plot starts developing about how people are going to come back tonight, like after the producers are gone, and like kick these people's ass.
Holy
I mean, it was
shit.
really wild. Um,
This literally sounds like I make jokes about us watching stuff like the Gladiator games and the Hunger Games and the Squid Games. I make jokes that we're like coming to that point where we're just like watching ourselves destroy each other for entertainment. And it sounds like I missed the boat because the colony happened.
yeah, maybe
Jeez.
we'll have like a popularity resurgence.
That's I'm gonna go watch it. I gotta at least see what this is
Yeah.
about. It sounds completely fucking nuts.
Yeah, it really was. And it was super dangerous. And there
Yeah.
was I mean I it taught me a lot about television and about how also it teaches you a lot about like liability
Mm,
and lawyers and how what happens on set doesn't really matter that much because
nope.
it's going to get cleaned up by the lawyers later. And
Yep.
so um I mean, in addition to reality TV, I wanted to talk about background extras too, because they also are being
Yep.
abused in these same ways, and even worse monetarily. Because, for example, when you're an extra, your wage, like in Louisiana, will be something like 80 for 10, which
Hmm.
means that up till 10 hours for $80. But if you leave for any reason before you're dismissed, you get $0. So people are really
Wow.
trapped in these like abusive environments, and also the type of person, well, I mean there's a variety of type of people that do background extra work, but one of the demographics is really like elderly people who don't have access to other income sources. And so like for example in Louisiana, where it's like, you know, 110 in the shade, they have elderly people, you know, sitting in a car and telling them to turn off their AC because it's messing with the sound, and people get hurt all the time.
Yeah.
And so it you know, the I was also thinking about like stunt people, and I was on the set of Green Lantern for about a
Okay.
month, and I was an extra for that. I was like a featured hot extra or whatever, level up. And so they had this one scene where they were like, okay, we have the best stunt helicopter driver in the industry, and he's going to come here, and everybody just like be chill under this helicopter. And then the helicopter hit a tree like right in front of us.
My
And when
God.
you're in that Hollywood environment, you're like, did it really hit the tree? Is this like Hollywood magic? Is this a real fire? I don't know.
Is this CGI? I'm like watching this in
Yeah.
real time.
And I was thinking of another one on Green Lantern where there were a bunch of extras and they had a fast car scene, and they needed all these cars parked on the side of the road for the stunt driver to whip
Mm.
past. And so they asked the extras, like, does anyone want their $20 bump to volunteer your car
Oh
right
my
now?
God.
And, you know, some desperate young woman was like, oh, yeah, here's my car, and puts it there. And immediately the stunt driver smashes into it. So,
For 20 bucks.
yeah.
Jesus.
And I've seen it like in that scene too, like there were a lot of chaos scenes. And so they would have hundreds of people like running at each other as fast as they could, and in these really chaotic environments, and like people would fall and like break bones, and I mean it's
And
so
that's a regulated big Hollywood
yeah,
production that you're talking about. Like, geez.
yeah,
This is like, well, for your entertainment,
yeah,
we're allowed to do whatever the hell we want.
yeah. So when
That's
they
so
make AI
crazy.
instead of background extras, I won't be
Yeah.
totally heartbroken.
Well, they are. I had an actor on my podcast when the strike was going on, and we were talking a lot about what they wanted to do with AI, and that is the least of the problems
Hmm.
what they want to do with AI. But it's so crazy. What a wild world we live in. Like
Yeah,
this
it's hard
stuff.
to watch TV. Like I pretty much only watch documentaries and like tutorials because I
Well, I
can't even
have some
handle
bad
looking
news
at
for
all
you.
these poor people.
I have some bad news for you. Documentaries are just as bad, if not worse. I actually had a Margie Ratliff from The Staircase. She was one of the daughters in The Staircase on my show in December, and we're friends too. But she did not consent to that documentary. They made a Max HBO Max show out of it. She did not consent to that.
Hmm.
Not paid, all that stuff. Having your family trauma, uh, everywhere for
Yeah.
everyone to come. I mean, it's just that's a brutal, unregulated industry as well.
Hmm.
But I still
Well,
watch
true
them.
crime is a little worse in that world.
Oh, totally. They get like they get a narrative, and
Hmm.
I realize that watching Making a Murderer on
Hmm.
Netflix, because I just remember watching it. I'm like, this feels like I'm being led down a path that of a
Hmm.
storyline they're trying to, and it kind of came out later that it was very pointed in its direction. But it's just all this stuff we watch, I feel like we got to watch it for entertainment purposes only, and then make sure that we're not killing people, hurting people, traumatizing or re-traumatizing people as we make it, and then we can all live in simpatico and enjoy the entertainment.
Yeah. We could write scripts that are safer too, you
Hmm.
know?
Or my god, use AI to enhance your special effects, right? Like,
Hmm.
stop the stunt person the moment it becomes a little unsafe, and
Hmm.
you know pay them the same way. Let them still be a stunt person, but just be safe with all of it. That's the whole thing. We're all human beings.
Hmm.
So, well, this has been a amazing conversation. We covered a lot. I feel I
Hmm.
almost messaged you and was like, "Do you want to do like a whole second episode on the reality TV stuff?" But it ended up fitting in very very nicely to talk about that. But
Yeah.
well, one last thing I want to ask you, which I forgot I was going to ask you: how can people get involved with Donna's Law and get this passed nationally or on their state level?
Sure, they can go to donnaslaw.com and they can contact me. There's pretty much every contact um, piece on that leads back to me, so I'll see it. There's options to write to your legislator, which I'll be seeing your email coming through, and I'm very hands on with everything. So, one of the ways that people can help is by helping us connect with a sponsor in their state. So, if they just contact us and let us know what state they're in and that they want to help, either when it comes to their state, we can bring them in, or we can leverage their constituency to talk to the right people that we need to get in meetings with. So, with very little effort, they can help.
That's awesome. And I'll make sure the link to donnaslaw.com is in our show notes as well so people can get involved. I think you had templates too, don't you? Templates for
Hmm.
letters. And so you've done a really nice job of making it easy and accessible for people to do. Um,
Yeah.
and then before we go, I know we kind of chatted, but is there anything you want to ask me? I always like to give people an ask me anything, especially when I don't know them very well.
Oh, let me think. I guess I guess to make you think, like, who are the other organizations that support you in the work that with your nonprofit?
Yeah. So with the UCAN Foundation, we have, man, there's so much support out there now, both individually, but and organizations. We have a member of the Teamsters Union that is on our board of directors, and we have several other we have representation from the Teamsters, but we have other unions that have been supportive. Political organizing group, the Working Family Party, has been supportive. Their parent organization is our fiscal sponsor. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that actually, but anyway, they've been really. I'll check on that. They've been
Uh,
really good at helping us take our donations while we wait for our 501c3 status. We
nice.
also have connections and conversations at SAG-AFTRA
Mm-hmm.
about what's going on. You can't partner with the NLRB, which is the National Labor Relations Board, because they're a government, independent
Mm-hmm.
entity. But we do hook up other cast members to file charges against these production companies for their illegal acts, or at least what we believe is illegal, and working again, not with, but working to have the NLRB declare reality cast members as employees, because we're currently classified as contractors. And
Mm-hmm.
so if we get that designation of employees, it's going to null and void so many pieces of the contract that would be deemed illegal. So one of those things is you sign away your right to be in a union. And,
Mm-hmm.
to sum it up, basically, if we get that classification, that part becomes null and void. We can talk about our working conditions without NDAs holding us down
Mm-hmm.
and getting millions of dollars of charges. So, with the Teamsters and with SAG and with working families, and we've partnered with moveon.org as well. We have a petition, moveon.org/reality, to get a simple disclaimer before all shows, reminding people that these are for entertainment purposes only. And you should view it that way and not take, what you're seeing as absolute gospel of reality. So we've got all sorts of different organizations there that are supporting us or have supported us or have guided us, on how to start doing the activism that actually leads to
Mm-hmm.
change instead of just talking about it on Instagram and in interviews. So it's been, I have to say, like, when I started this thing, or when we started this thing back in April last year, I thought this would be the most passive. Every now and then I would talk to a cast member, we'd get them a lawyer, we'd get them mental health support, whatever that is. And then maybe in 5 years, we would have made enough way to like start talking about unionization. And I kind of just was like, this is going to be something that is in the background and it's going to be slow. And it exploded out of the gate. We have
Mm-hmm.
talked to over 100 cast members. I have heard the worst, horrific stories of people being traumatized, people being injured, severe damage to mental health, physical health. And I'm just blown away by the level of support that these other organizations have had and how they have helped lift us up to be more than a dating app for therapists
Mm-hmm.
and lawyers, essentially, and really prop this up into being an effective organization that's actually advocating for change in the industry. And we're going to get it. I can't wait. We're going to get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like it,
Yeah.
Like sometimes I think about all the things that are happening to me now in my work with Donna's Law are the things that happen before we win. Like all the things that you're talking about, like that's the win,
Yeah.
that's what it looks like when you win.
And it's that quote, and I kind of alluded to it earlier when I said, "Has the NRA come after you yet?" Because that's the quote, and it's used to be Gandhi. Now they say Gandhi didn't say it, but it's first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they come for you, then you win. So
Yeah. Yeah, then you buy
I
a
know.
better mic. I
Then
bought a
yeah.
new mic today. I was like, I really want them to hear me today.
Oh, you sound great.
Good.
Which mic did you get?
I got the Amazon special.
Nice, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, I mean, so your voice is so important.
It is. It is. And you get an opportunity to share your story. You want people to hear you. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I want to thank you again. I know we're going to put Donna's Law down here in the show notes. We'll put your social and your art websites on there as well. But where can people find you if they want to get in contact with you outside of your websites?
They can Google me, Katrina Brees. They can find all kinds of entry points on that, and I will see them all. Instagram's a good one if they want to check out my art and see my various projects. I'm at Katrina Brees.
Very nice. Thank you again, first and foremost, for sharing your story and being who you are, and more importantly, the work that you're doing to make your mom's legacy something that matters not just to you, but to so many people. I'm grateful for it.
Thanks for this conversation. It's really important. It was great.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of Eyes Wide Open. If you enjoy the show, the best way to support us is by sharing or dropping a review. For more information and content, check out engagewithnick.com or find me on Instagram at nthompson513. Don't go through life blind. Do the work so you can show up in the world with your eyes wide open.